How do you use LLMs without becoming dependent on them? How do you balance development speed with a deep understanding of what you're actually building? Because on one hand, tools like Claude and Cursor are incredibly useful. I use them myself all the time. But on the other hand, I've seen developers generate thousands of lines of Rust code and have to start all over because they couldn't understand what was generated. And I've seen this pattern a lot because over the last couple of years, I've personally mentored over 100 engineers learning Rust. Some made progress incredibly quickly. Others spent months feeling stuck, or became completely dependent on AI to write code for them. And after seeing this happen over and over again, I started noticing some very clear patterns. Certain approaches consistently worked. Others almost always led to frustration. So in this video, I want to share some of the biggest lessons I've learned from mentoring over 100 Rust engineers. What actually worked, what didn't, and how I would approach learning Rust if I had to start all over again today. Let's get into it. The first lesson I learned is you can outsource intelligence, but you cannot outsource understanding. This is a saying that's becoming more and more relevant in the age of AI. And it means that there's a big difference between getting answers and actually understanding why those answers work. Without a proper understanding of how things work, you get stuck very quickly. Generating code you can't debug, copy-pasting fixes you can't extend, and revisiting the same problems over and over again. This is especially true for Rust and systems programming. AI is really good at generating a ton of code. And it works really well if you're working on higher level code bases like web development projects, where you need to build as much and as quickly as possible. But in systems programming or other level programming, which is the majority of Rust projects, optimizing for performance and safety is often the entire job. Generating a ton of code where you don't understand what the code is doing or what trade-offs are being made isn't going to make you a more valuable contributor to the company. It's just going to make you a worse systems engineer over time. So the lesson is you can delegate a lot of the typing to LLMs, but don't let it do the thinking for you. Otherwise, you'll never have the understanding required to write robust, production-grade, low-level software. The second lesson I learned is to stay focused and avoid scope creep. As developers, we're constantly falling into scope creep. There are always new features to build, architectural improvements to make, or cleaner patterns to apply. That's how a simple 2-week project becomes a 6-month project. And a lot of developers make the same exact mistake when learning Rust, or when learning a new technology in general. Maybe they start by wanting to build a backend service, but then get interested in embedded systems. Then they discover another YouTube video, another book, another rabbit hole, another side quest, or tangent that ultimately doesn't help them with their main goal. Or worse, many developers don't even take the time to figure out what they're trying to achieve when they're getting started with Rust. Are you trying to become a systems engineer? Are you trying to fill in your knowledge gaps as a developer and learn how low-level programming works? Or do you just want to learn enough Rust to understand how Rust works at a high level and why it's loved by so many developers? The most productive developers I've worked with start by defining their objective and career goals with Rust, which is usually trying to transition to a Rust role. And in most cases, the most effective first step for them is to scope down the Rust learning to the 20% of Rust they need for that goal, and execute their original plan without getting distracted or nerd sniped by some random article or video the algorithm feeds them. Because there's an infinite amount of knowledge related to Rust out there for anyone to learn. Embedded or robotic software, security and infrastructure software, distributed systems, desktop apps, and more. But when you aimlessly try to learn everything there is, you end up learning nothing well. The third lesson I learned is that you cannot build junior level projects anymore. If your goal is to land a Rust job, your projects need to demonstrate skills companies actually pay for. A few years ago, building a simple REST API, CLI tool, or key value store might have helped you stand out. But today, LLMs can generate most of that in minutes. And that's the problem. A lot of developers know they need portfolio projects. Where they go wrong is building projects that showcase skills AI can already replicate with very little effort. Put yourself in the company's shoes. If most of the projects could be generated by Claude or Cursor in an afternoon, what are you actually demonstrating? You're not showing that you can solve difficult engineering problems. You're not showing that you can make trade-offs, optimize performance, design systems, or work through ambiguity. The hiring bar has been raised significantly. The engineers that stand out today are the ones that can solve problems that are genuinely hard. And if you're targeting mid to senior level Rust roles, your portfolio needs to reflect that. Even junior roles now expect skills that would have been considered mid-level or even senior level just a few years back. And honestly, this isn't just true for Rust. It's true for software engineering as a whole. So what projects actually work? Looking back at the developers who I've seen land Rust roles, the projects generally fell into one of three buckets: work experience, real problems solved for real companies; open source contributions, meaningful contributions to libraries or tools other developers actually use; or custom projects that solve a real problem and force you to deal with real engineering challenges. The common thread isn't the project category. It's that these projects require the developer to make decisions, navigate trade-offs, and solve problems that didn't already have a step-by-step tutorial. The fourth lesson I learned is that community and accountability is everything. Here's what I've noticed. Most developers try to learn Rust but then end up giving up. But they don't always give up because Rust is too hard. More times than not, they give up because they keep losing momentum. A weekend break turns into two. 2 weekends turns into months without touching Rust. And when you try to get back into it, half of what you learned you already forgot, and you have to restart from scratch again. Repeat that a few more times, and that's how you end up trying for months and years and end up having nothing to show for it. That's why community and accountability matter so much. When you're surrounded by other developers learning alongside you, it's a lot harder to quietly disappear. You have people asking how your project is going. You have study groups, you have deadlines. You have other people dealing with the exact same frustrations and roadblocks that you're facing. And when motivation inevitably disappears, accountability is what keeps you moving forward until the motivation comes back. Looking back at the students who made the fastest progress, it wasn't necessarily because they were the smartest. It wasn't because they had more free time. It was because they stayed consistent. Developers who end up achieving their career goals are the ones who stay in the game long enough to get good. Most people don't fail because Rust is too hard. They fail because they stop showing up. The fifth lesson I learned is honestly the most important and fundamental one. Out of the hundreds of engineers I've mentored, the ones that succeeded all had one thing in common. One thing that separated them from the people who failed. They all joined the Rust Live Accelerator program. In fact, as far as I'm aware, there has never been a single Rust engineer in the history of humanity who got hired without joining the Rust Live Accelerator first. Before the Rust Live Accelerator existed, getting a Rust job was considered impossible by leading experts. All jokes aside, if you're thinking about using Rust professionally, I've built the Rust Live Accelerator around these exact lessons that I've learned over the last 5 years. After you join, you'll be mentored by professional Rust experts who will give you code reviews, help you with architecture, and get you to the point where you can build sophisticated, production-grade Rust software with confidence. On top of that, we have a team of recruiters and career coaches who will help you turn those skills into high-paying Rust roles. We've helped hundreds of developers, and we want to do the same for you. We only have 7 or 8 spots left for the June cohort at the time of this recording, and the application period is about to close in just a few more days. So click the link below to reserve your spot. And you'll also get our 3-step Rust developer roadmap as a small gift. So tap the link, apply to see if you're qualified, and I'll see you inside.